One thing that I wanted to ask you about, this was really driving me, I don't want to say crazy, but I was really thinking about it. So I'm studying a bunch of Antonioni movies right now. I watched La Notte, and then I was watching Red Desert.
Mm-hmm.
I love La Notte more. And then I put on, because he's huge in my generation, is Paul Thomas Anderson. I put on There Will Be Blood.
Yeah.
And I remember in your review, you were like, I can only imagine what a true visionary like an Antonioni would do.
Mm.
And I kind of want to know, because Antonioni gets accused of being plotless. People say his movies are boring. So what is a quote-unquote, I'm saying boring in a non-pejorative sense. What is what makes a boring, quote-unquote, film by Antonioni great and not something like There Will Be Blood or Paul Thomas Anderson's?
Well, because it's not really boring. And that's the guy who called Kubrick's 2001 just landscape. These people are idiots, and people use these kinds of epithets against film. Antonioni, I've always said, I always pair him with Bergman. Bergman looks at the human condition with a microscope. He gets in, you can see almost the pores on the faces of some of his characters when he goes close up. Antonioni looks at humanity from the end of a telescope. He's out in the big picture. And if you've seen Red Desert, one of the greatest all-time sequences in film history is when the mother character, who's nuts, is telling her son, who's faked an injury or an illness, the story about the girl on the beach and the singing.
There's the humming in the background.
And it's a song called Astrale. I forget who's the singer, but and that the whole cosmos is singing, and it's such a great, powerful moment, and that's something that someone like Paul Thomas Anderson, who's a good, solid, capable filmmaker, could never conceive of. He's never going to have a moment like that in any of his movies. Just like there's never going to be a moment like the ending of O Hussar Balthazar with the dying donkey in a Spielberg movie. There is never going to be any of half a dozen of the great moments in an Orson Welles film, in the films of the guy who did the Dark Knight trilogy, Chris Nolan. You're never going to have that, because these guys, even if they have the ability to be an artist, they have sold out and they've neutered themselves. They're never going to have that because they've cut off their testicles. They have willingly become eunuchs. They are artistic eunuchs. They have sold out and they will not be better. Just like Pynchon sold out. Pynchon has a little bit of talent. He could have been something more. I've argued with a number of people. We're talking about Vonnegut. Think of Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, and it's basically, in many ways, the same story as Slaughterhouse-Five. Yet,
I couldn't do Gravity's Rainbow. I couldn't get through it.
Yeah, but it's 6 times as long. It's not funny in the least. Pynchon and David Foster Wallace are some of the driest, least humorous writers going. Vonnegut, at his best, was such a great writer because he could, even more so than Hemingway, could have that rat-a-tat-tat little boom, 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 and end with the, pooty wheat, of the bird. Life goes on, pooty wheat. That's just that little moment there that recurs in Slaughterhouse-Five is, again, something ideationally beyond Thomas Pynchon. You're never going to get that. If you look in and you're reading my Tumbleweeds, Pynchon could never come up with something that functions, the function, forget even the quality, but the function of the legend teller sequences in that book, if you've read 1 or 2 of them so far.
Well, the thing is, right now I'm finishing your. I have 2 things. So I'm finishing your Scenes from a City, reading different stories in that, and then I'm only on Tumbleweeds.
Yeah.
And I can already tell. Like, I love reading Tumbleweeds. I tried so hard to read the Pynchon stuff. Like, I really try to be open-minded, and just I can't really remember much from it. And what bothers me is about Pynchon is that there are occasional passages where you can see there is something there. Like, I think there is talent, but he's just he's mired in so much
Don
crap.
DeLillo is an even better writer, but he's someone. If you've read his most famous book, which is Underworld, Don DeLillo has a good short story that opens that. It was published as a short story. It's about the 1951 Major League Baseball playoff game between the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers. And then the rest of the book is just a piece of shit. And so why do we have this really good, if not great, but a good to very good short story of maybe 6,000-7,000 words that opens the book? And then why do we have another, I don't know, 250,000 words of garbage? And this tells me this is someone, and Cormac McCarthy is another one. These are people who have these fleeting moments, but at some level, they fucking sold out. I'll give you an example. I don't know how much you're into poetry. I think you said you're not into poetry. But
I'm here and there. You know, I mean, I have a E.E. Cummings collection, a Rilke collection, a Plath collection, and I've read poetry on your website.
And there's a guy named Robert Bly who wrote a book called Iron John back in the late 90s. It started this idiotic thing called the men's movement. And Robert Bly was a poet who had some real talent. You can see it in some of his early stuff. And then he decided to become famous. And he wrote this ridiculously intellectually sterile book. Other poets have done the same thing. And again, it's this, you know, I mean, I'd love to be able to make a living. I don't have to be a millionaire. If I could make, or Jessica and I combined could make what we're making now and be able to have medical insurance and just go off into a small Texas town farther west from Austin area where we live, I'd do that in a heartbeat. But I'm not going to sell myself out for that. I'm not going to compromise about that because ultimately it's not about me. Art is not about the artist. Art is always about the recipient. There's no fucking reason for an artist to exist. Just to, I know the thing. I know, even though I don't know what I'm gonna, all the words that are gonna appear in my Sargon play as we record now, I know that what I'm gonna do is gonna have great value to others. But ultimately, whatever that turns out to be about, I already know. I just don't know the specifics. That's again part of the fun part. But that art exists for you. That art exists for someone who's going to be born in 512 years, assuming we don't fuck with the planet. That's going to be there for that Andromedan in 10,000 years flying across the cosmos that I can only vaguely grasp, rather.
And that's why you call your site Cosmoetica.
Well, it's two reasons. Cosmos and Poetica, but Cosmos meaning the cosmos, and Cosmos also meaning peace. You know, that there's a sense of inner peace there too. So that's what we're the alternate would have been Omniversica, which but Cosmoetica.com was more alliterative, so I went with that. And I didn't want to have DanSchneider.com because then I get confused with that fat bastard who makes these terrible children's TV shows.